I'm Ann Simmons, reporting from the newsroom of the Los Angeles Times. As the White House pushes for congressional approval of a possible military strike on Syria, questions abound over the nature of such an attack, what impact this action might have on the Syrian conflict, which has raged on for more than 2 years, and the global ramifications of US involvement in yet another war in the Middle East. Joining me to shed light on these issues is Times senior international affairs columnist, Carol J. Williams. Welcome, Carol.
Hi, nice to see you.
Well, tell us first of all, Carol, Obama is in a bit of a quandary, it seems, because now he's trying to seek congressional approval. They could say no. What kind of strategy does he have to employ in order to convince Congress?
Well, I think he has to raise the moral card, the obligation that he feels the United States and other Western states have to insist that Syria abide by the international norms of war and the laws of war. He has already had some success in winning over some of the Republican leaders in Congress. Earlier today, House Speaker Boehner said he would support the resolution. I think that, this is an attempt to make it a wider and broader decision by the United States and not just a White House decision.
Now, the president of Syria, Bashar Assad, has warned that military intervention could actually spark a regional war. How plausible is that?
Well, there have been threats to strike Israel in retaliation for any Western airstrikes on Syria. Russia has also warned that there are consequences throughout the region, that this could incite more sectarian violence between different Muslim groups. I think a lot of this is sort of, threats aimed at deterring Western airstrikes and raising the prospects of a wider war. But whether other countries would actually invite further, attacks and retaliation for the chemical weapons strikes is yet to be seen.
And what kind of impact is a chemical or is a military strike on Syria likely to have? I mean, can the US actually target Syria's chemical weapons?
No, they can't. And almost everybody you talk with admits that because there's not enough reliable intelligence on what is stored, where it's stored, how you could destroy it without releasing the toxins and the nerve agents that are contained in the canisters. They have a fairly good idea of where some of these sites are, but they aren't sure if they know about all of them. There's suspicion that there might be some underground bunkers. There's no way to attack from the air and be sure that you're not causing more damage than you're preventing by unleashing some of these really dangerous agents.
Now, Russia, which has been an ally of Syria for a long time, has been moving warships into the Mediterranean. How likely is it that Russia would support Syria if there is a strike on Syria?
Well, I think it's unlikely because there's not much they can do to prevent airstrikes on Syria. I think the movement of the naval vessels is more of a demonstration of gunboat diplomacy in hopes of dissuading the West from making these attacks. But aside from maybe jamming Western communications and radars in the course of a Western air attack on Syria, there's not much they can do to prevent it or to shield Syria from that.
Well, thank you so much for your insights, Carol. Of course, this is a story we're going to be continuing to follow. For more on the Syrian conflict and other stories, please visit latimes.com.
TV look at the history and literary life of Annapolis. Saturday at noon Eastern on C-SPAN 2 and Sunday at 5 on C-SPAN 3. Washington Journal continues.
Joining us now, Danielle Pleck of American Enterprise Institute. She is the Vice President for Foreign and Defense Studies. Good morning.
Good morning.
What do you think about the president's proposal as it's been made so far for Syria?
It's not one that I think infuses anyone with a great deal of confidence about what the president's end game is, what his aims are, what strategy it is a part of. I think that's part of the reason why the president's policies haven't been very popular. Polls out this morning show that there really is very limited support in the public for a strike on Syria. The president's policies haven't been very popular. Polls out this morning show that there really is very limited support in the public for a strike on Syria. And part of the reason for that, I think, is that people understand instinctively that there's not enough of a narrative there from the president.
Do you support it personally?
It's a hard call for me. I'll be very honest with you. I've been urging the president to do more on Syria for more than 2 years, and I wrote an article in the Journal a few months back detailing how I thought the United States could be helpful to the rebels in conducting a series of very targeted strikes on airfields and things like that. My biggest fear here is that this is just one of those missiles into an empty tent that does nothing to help the rebels, does nothing to stop the use of chemical weapons, does nothing to shift the balance of the war, and just makes people mad.
So if calls Panama City, Florida, Independent Line. Johnny, you're up first for Danielle Pleck. Good morning.
Good morning. My main statement would be Benghazi. Remember we went in there without boots on the ground, and you see how that turned out. And again, a second point about babies. If you don't think he won't have babies lined up on the sidewalk after an attack, you're crazy. I mean, there's no way to win this thing, to go in there and strike this. This is just a stay-out policy. Or it's going to be another Benghazi at best. And at the worst, it's going to be babies lined up on the streets. And, we're already kind of supporting this cannibal in the first place. So, I mean, we got to look who we're really supporting in this. It's a little embarrassing for the president, but, he's the one that opened his mouth and inserted foot. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
I've heard a lot of these analogies to Benghazi, and I guess the president set himself up for that because Libya was so important, but Syria has been so unimportant in his worldview. But the analogies aren't really that apt. We had an ambassador on the ground in Benghazi and a CIA station and some consular officials. That's not what we have on the ground in Syria. We don't have anyone on the ground in Syria, and the president isn't proposing to put anybody on the ground. In fact, the biggest criticism that I've heard is that we didn't do in Benghazi what we're proposing to do in Syria. Should have hit them with a couple of well-placed missiles, should have done something about the al-Qaeda that was seeping into Benghazi, and that would have stopped Ambassador Stevens and others from being killed. So, I don't think the analogy is apt, but I think the president set himself up.
Bath, New York. Edward, good morning, Democrats line.
Yes, my name is Edward Manning. Thanks for taking my call. What I wanted to know is, do they really believe that, shooting missiles into this place is not going to spread these chemicals even further? You know what I'm saying? It's not like we're destroying conventional weapons. We're destroying chemical weapons. So wouldn't that spread? And why is Russia not trying to do anything to stop what's going on over there? They're the biggest supporters of them, right? So that's my question. Keep it short.
Well done. I think those are very good questions. And in the first case, on the technical aspects of what a strike would look like, what we hear through the news media and leaks from the White House is that the president isn't proposing to strike at actual chemical stockpiles, which I think is risky, although, again, chemicals are very unstable. They do, if you hit them with a missile, they will more likely burn up than spread. That being said, I think the proposition is to go after Assad's means of delivery of these chemical weapons and perhaps some of the units. That being said, I think the proposition is to go after Assad's means of delivery of these chemical weapons and perhaps some of the units that are involved in the dispersal of chemical weapons. Those are some of the things I've seen in public reporting. As far as the Russians, they're playing a complicated game here, and while I think that they may serve Putin's ego nicely, I'm not quite sure that they serve Russia's long-term strategic interests. Putin likes to play this sort of the communist nostalgic game. No, we're a great power on par with the United States, and you choose your guys in the Middle East, and we'll choose our guys, and then that'll kind of be a nice balance of power. And I don't think that's the case. I also think that at the end of the day, Assad is not going to remain in power. Let's hope that who is there afterwards is better. But even if they're worse, let me tell Russia something. Are you listening?
So is there a message then by the president going to St. Petersburg even for the G20?
Well, I mean, I think, again, the message from the president is going to be to try to shore up our side versus Putin. The problem for Putin is Russia is their only, Syria is their only port in the Middle East. It is one of their few allies, and that's not going to be there for them now that he's taken the wrong side against the Syrian people. Today, he gave an interview to the Associated Press, and he was a little bit more equivocal. He said, well, I'd be open to a UN Security Council resolution if it were really proved that chemical weapons were used. Maybe that's a trap. Maybe it's him trying to be conciliatory. Let's hope it's the latter.
We continue with calls. Georgia, independent line. Rusty, good morning.
Good morning. My comment is about in the narrowed focus of the Senate hearings where Secretary Kerry was stating the fact that this was a narrowed and focused attempt at Syria, but isn't there a statement in there that says that the president may act upon non-state and state actors in this, and so then this would bleed over into maybe Hezbollah or Iran and broaden this engagement in a bigger and more regional conflict than a narrowed conflict?
And even Ben Rhodes, the deputy assistant security advisor, has an op-ed in USA Today, and the headline says that the military action is part of a broader strategy.
It's part of a broader strategy, but not, as the caller suggested, a strategy to go after either Hezbollah, the Lebanese terrorist group that's fighting alongside Assad, or Iran. You know, I think that there are people who suspect, wrongly, that this is just a pretext for the president to go in and start bombing everybody we don't like. And that might be nice in some cases, because goodness knows we're going to need a strategy to deal with both Hezbollah and Iran, and the president doesn't have one. That being said, I don't think that the construction of the resolution as it came out of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee last night is going to allow the president any such latitude. It's very specific about targets in Syria.
Mary, up next from Longwood, Florida, independent line. Hello.
Hello, how are you? Good morning. I just want to point out this nice lady is a representative of AEI. A lot of the AEI scholars were pretty much the leading architects of the second Bush administration policy, like John Bolton. And I know that Syria's oil is nationalized, and the EU put sanctions on that. So Shell, one of the few companies who are allowed to do business within Syria, has been squashed for this during the civil war. And I'm wondering if we went in, the EU lifted these sanctions, if they went down to the nitty-gritty. I think this is all about the oil. Because like the AEI, they're an independent nonprofit, and they're supported by corporations, from corporations we don't even know what. And that's my only comment. Going to Syria, we need to take care of business here at home. And we the people have a message. No, to the Congress who vote yes for this. You want to vote yes to this, then you march your little heinies, you take your sons and your grandsons, and you go on over there. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, caller.
I'm always disappointed when I hear people say, march your heinies over and do it yourself. I think John McCain and Lindsey Graham, who are two of the biggest proponents of having a robust strategy in Syria, gave amply in service to their country, and I'm sorry to hear anybody criticize them or any other person who's serving their country, whether in Congress or anywhere else. Let's talk about Syrian oil. Syria has almost no oil. It's one of the biggest disappointments for the Assad dictatorships over the years. Last time I looked, which was a little while ago, they had a 10-year supply of oil sufficient for domestic use. They are an incredibly poor country, resource poor. Syria's greatest wealth has always been its people, its entrepreneurs, and I hope that'll